Welcome to Framer Audiobooks, where ambition meets clarity, where ideas evolve into empires, and where the mindset behind success is explored with depth, precision, and purpose. Because here we do not simply talk about business, we dissect the psychology that builds it, the discipline that sustains it, and the thinking that multiplies it. Today, we present entrepreneurs, business mindset, and wealth thinking, a powerful exploration into the mental frameworks, strategic philosophies, and financial perspectives that separate those who merely work within systems from those who design them, scale them, and ultimately own them. This audiobook is not just about starting a business or making money, but about transforming the way you perceive opportunity, risk, value creation, and long-term growth. Because true entrepreneurship begins in the mind long before it appears in the marketplace. Within these chapters, you will discover how successful entrepreneurs think differently about problems, why wealth is built through leverage rather than labor alone, how calculated risk becomes a catalyst for expansion, and why disciplined decision-making determines whether opportunity becomes profit or remains unrealized potential. You will learn how to shift from a scarcity-based mentality that fears competition and limitation into an abundance-driven perspective that identifies unmet needs, builds strategic solutions, and positions value where demand already exists. As you listen, you will begin to understand that financial freedom is not the result of luck or timing alone, but the outcome of intentional thinking patterns, consistent execution, adaptive learning, and the courage to act while others hesitate. This journey will challenge the way you evaluate security, stability, and success, because entrepreneurship demands responsibility, vision, resilience, and the willingness to evolve continuously in response to changing markets and emerging trends. If this audiobook expands your thinking, sharpens your strategy, or inspires you to take decisive action toward building assets and influence, be sure to follow Framer Audiobooks, subscribe for more powerful insights, leave a review to support our mission, and share this experience with someone ready to elevate their business mindset and embrace wealth thinking with clarity and confidence. Now, prepare to think differently, to see opportunity where others see uncertainty, and to step into a mindset where growth is intentional, wealth is strategic, and entrepreneurship becomes not just an occupation but a disciplined way of life. This audiobook has been intentionally structured into 8 comprehensive chapters, each designed to expand your entrepreneurial awareness, refine your strategic thinking, and progressively build the mental architecture required for sustainable wealth creation in competitive and ever-evolving markets. As we begin with the first chapter, understand that every principle you absorb will serve as a foundational layer upon which your business confidence, financial intelligence, and long-term success will steadily rise. Chapter 1. The entrepreneurial identity, vision, ownership, risk awareness, and the psychology of opportunity. In this first chapter, titled The Entrepreneurial Identity, Vision, Ownership, Risk Awareness, and the Psychology of Opportunity, we explore the internal transformation required to move from passive income seeker to proactive value creator, examining how clarity of vision, radical ownership of results, intelligent risk evaluation, and opportunity-focused thinking combine to establish the psychological foundation necessary for building sustainable businesses and long-term wealth. The entrepreneurial identity begins with vision, which is the disciplined ability to see possibilities beyond present circumstances and to mentally construct a future that does not yet exist while maintaining the conviction that it can be built through structured planning and consistent execution. Vision provides direction, but ownership provides power, because when you accept full responsibility for outcomes rather than attributing results to external forces, you reclaim control over strategy, adaptation, and improvement in ways that dramatically accelerate growth. Entrepreneurs who develop strong ownership habits stop blaming market conditions, competition, or temporary setbacks, and instead analyze their positioning, refine their offers, and adjust their methods until measurable progress becomes inevitable. Risk awareness is not about avoiding uncertainty but about understanding probabilities, evaluating downside exposure, and making informed decisions that balance ambition with calculated protection of resources. When you learn to distinguish reckless risk from strategic risk, you cultivate confidence that is grounded in preparation and research rather than impulse or overconfidence. Opportunity-focused thinking trains your mind to scan environments for inefficiencies, unmet needs, emerging trends, and gaps in value delivery that can be transformed into scalable solutions. This mindset shift creates a powerful competitive advantage, because while others focus on limitations or economic fears, you concentrate on innovation, differentiation, and strategic positioning. The benefit of developing a strong entrepreneurial identity is that it reshapes how you interpret failure, allowing you to see setbacks as data rather than defeat and to treat feedback as refinement rather than rejection. Another significant advantage lies in increased resilience, because when your identity is anchored in growth and ownership, temporary losses no longer threaten your confidence or long-term commitment. This chapter is important because without a transformed identity, strategies remain inconsistent and execution remains fragile. But with the right psychological foundation, even imperfect plans can evolve into profitable systems through disciplined persistence. As you internalize the principles of vision, ownership, intelligent risk awareness, and opportunity psychology, you begin constructing a mental framework that not only supports business growth but also strengthens your ability to adapt, innovate, and lead within increasingly complex and competitive economic landscapes. As you begin to internalize the entrepreneurial identity built on vision, ownership, risk awareness, and opportunity psychology, you will recognize that mindset alone is not enough unless it is supported by strategic execution and financial intelligence that translate ideas into measurable results. With this deeper awareness, we now transition into the second chapter, where thinking evolves into structured action and ambition becomes aligned with systems that generate consistent growth. Chapter 2. Strategic execution, systems thinking, value creation, market positioning, and scalable growth. In this chapter, titled Strategic Execution, Systems Thinking, Value Creation, Market Positioning, and Scalable Growth, we explore how entrepreneurs transform ideas into sustainable enterprises by designing systems, delivering exceptional value, positioning strategically within competitive markets, and building scalable models that expand beyond personal effort. Strategic execution begins with systems thinking, which is the ability to view a business not as isolated tasks but as interconnected processes that must function cohesively to produce consistent outcomes. When you develop systems thinking, you shift from working in your business to designing the architecture of your business, allowing operations to become structured, measurable, and continuously improvable. Value creation remains the central engine of all profitable ventures, because revenue flows naturally toward solutions that solve meaningful problems efficiently and distinctively. Entrepreneurs who prioritize value over vanity metrics focus on customer transformation, product refinement, and service excellence rather than superficial indicators of popularity or temporary attention. Market positioning determines how your audience perceives your offer relative to alternatives, and deliberate positioning allows you to compete on uniqueness and clarity instead of engaging in destructive price wars. Scalable growth requires processes that can expand without proportionally increasing effort or cost, which means building infrastructure, automation, delegation frameworks, and replicable strategies. Financial discipline supports strategic execution by ensuring that revenue is allocated toward reinvestment, operational efficiency, and long-term stability rather than impulsive expansion. One of the key benefits of mastering execution is predictability, because structured systems reduce uncertainty and increase your ability to forecast performance. Another advantage lies in reduced burnout, since clear processes and scalable models prevent the entrepreneur from becoming the bottleneck of growth. This chapter is essential because without strategic execution, vision remains abstract and potential remains unrealized, but with disciplined systems in place, consistent growth becomes achievable. As you integrate systems thinking, value-driven positioning, and scalable design into your entrepreneurial approach, you strengthen your capacity to build enterprises that endure beyond temporary trends and personal limitations. Having explored how strategic execution transforms ideas into operational success, you are now prepared to confront the deeper financial psychology that determines whether revenue becomes fleeting income or enduring wealth. We now transition into Chapter 3, where we examine the principles of wealth thinking, capital allocation, asset building, and long-term financial expansion that define financially intelligent entrepreneurs. Chapter 3, Wealth Architecture, Capital Allocation, Asset Building, Financial Intelligence, and Long-Term Expansion. In this chapter, titled Wealth Architecture, Capital Allocation, Asset Building, Financial Intelligence, and Long-Term Expansion, we examine how entrepreneurs design financial structures that convert income into assets, leverage capital strategically, and cultivate financial intelligence that supports sustained prosperity. Wealth architecture begins with understanding the difference between income and assets, recognizing that true financial freedom arises from ownership of systems that generate returns independent of daily labor. Capital allocation requires disciplined decision-making about where resources are invested, ensuring that profits are directed toward growth opportunities, innovation, and risk-managed expansion rather than short-term consumption. Entrepreneurs who master asset building focus on equity, intellectual property, diversified investments, and scalable ventures that compound value over time. Financial intelligence includes the ability to read balance sheets, analyze cash flow, assess risk exposure, and interpret market signals with clarity and objectivity. Long-term expansion demands patience, because compounding growth often appears slow initially but accelerates dramatically when reinvestment and strategic leverage are consistently applied. One of the most significant benefits of wealth thinking is financial resilience, which protects entrepreneurs from market volatility and unexpected downturns. Another powerful advantage lies in increased freedom of choice, as accumulated assets create flexibility in decision-making and reduce dependency on single income streams. Wealth architecture also strengthens strategic confidence because financial clarity allows bold decisions to be made from preparation rather than desperation. This chapter emphasizes the importance of separating lifestyle inflation from wealth accumulation, encouraging disciplined reinvestment that prioritizes future stability over immediate gratification. The importance of mastering wealth architecture lies in its ability to transform entrepreneurial success from temporary profitability into generational sustainability. As you absorb the principles of capital allocation, asset building, financial intelligence, and long-term expansion, you construct a financial framework that supports not only business success but enduring prosperity built on strategy, discipline, and vision. As your understanding of entrepreneurial identity, execution, and wealth architecture matures, you begin to recognize that strategy and capital alone cannot sustain expansion unless they are reinforced by leadership, strength, and the capacity to guide others with clarity and conviction. With that realization, we now move into a chapter that explores how influence, authority, and team alignment transform personal ambition into organized momentum and scalable business power. Chapter 4: Leadership and Influence in Business. Leadership in business begins not with control but with vision. That is so clear and compelling that others willingly align their effort, creativity, and commitment toward bringing that vision into reality. And it is within this alignment that entrepreneurial ideas transition from isolated ambition into coordinated execution capable of producing meaningful scale. When an entrepreneur articulates direction with precision and confidence, uncertainty decreases across the organization, focus becomes sharper, and individual tasks begin to connect into a unified strategic movement rather than scattered activity. Influence, therefore, is not manipulation or authority imposed through hierarchy, but the earned capacity to inspire trust through consistency, competence, and demonstrated integrity in both calm and crisis. As this trust develops, communication becomes more efficient, collaboration becomes more natural, and resistance to change diminishes because people believe in both the mission and the person leading it. Leadership requires the discipline to make decisions even when information is incomplete, while simultaneously accepting responsibility for outcomes without deflecting blame or diminishing accountability. The strength of those decisions is reinforced by emotional intelligence, which enables leaders to manage conflict constructively, navigate differing personalities, and preserve morale during periods of rapid change or external pressure. As a result, leadership becomes a stabilizing force that absorbs volatility rather than amplifying it, allowing teams to operate with confidence even when markets fluctuate. When entrepreneurs cultivate this stability within themselves, they project calm authority that reassures stakeholders and reinforces organizational resilience. This steady presence reduces reactive behavior and supports strategic thinking across all levels of operation. Over time, leadership consistency establishes a cultural tone that influences performance standards, communication patterns, and expectations of excellence. Culture, in this sense, becomes an extension of leadership behavior rather than a separate initiative. The deeper you understand this dynamic, the more intentional you become about how your words, decisions, and emotional responses shape the long-term identity of your enterprise. As leadership clarity strengthens, the next layer of influence emerges through delegation and empowerment, because no business can scale sustainably if every decision and task remains dependent on the founder's direct involvement. Delegation is not abdication of responsibility but the strategic distribution of authority within clearly defined systems that preserve quality while expanding operational capacity. When expectations are clearly communicated and performance metrics are measurable, team members operate with autonomy while maintaining alignment with overarching objectives. This alignment allows innovation to occur within structure rather than chaos, which preserves brand consistency while encouraging initiative. Entrepreneurs who resist delegation often limit growth unintentionally, creating bottlenecks that slow expansion and increase burnout. In contrast, those who empower others invest in training, feedback systems, and leadership development within their teams, multiplying capability across the organization. As competence grows internally, decision-making becomes faster and more distributed, increasing responsiveness to market changes. Empowered teams also strengthen resilience, because challenges are addressed collectively rather than resting on a single individual's capacity. This shared responsibility builds confidence and loyalty, reinforcing organizational stability during periods of stress. Leadership influence therefore extends beyond direct instruction and evolves into cultural reinforcement, where standards are upheld even when the founder is not present. Over time, this autonomy creates scalability that is both operationally efficient and strategically sustainable. Through deliberate empowerment, entrepreneurs transform personal vision into collective execution capable of long-term expansion. Effective leadership also requires disciplined communication that connects strategy to daily action in ways that eliminate confusion and reinforce shared purpose. When communication lacks clarity, even talented teams misinterpret priorities and misallocate effort, leading to inefficiencies that quietly erode profitability. Clear communication translates abstract goals into measurable benchmarks, ensuring that everyone understands both direction and expectations. This precision reduces internal friction and fosters accountability without micromanagement. Leaders who communicate transparently about challenges cultivate trust because openness signals respect for the intelligence and contribution of the team. Transparency also encourages proactive problem-solving, as employees feel informed rather than excluded from strategic realities. As communication strengthens, organizational alignment becomes self-reinforcing, because individuals understand how their contributions fit within broader objectives. This understanding increases motivation, since people are more engaged when they perceive meaning in their work. Over time, consistent communication shapes a culture of responsibility and initiative, reducing dependency on constant oversight. In this environment, productivity becomes structured rather than reactive. The organization begins operating with rhythm rather than chaos. Through disciplined communication, leadership influence becomes embedded in daily operations. Decision-making under pressure represents another defining dimension of business leadership. As markets rarely provide perfect information before demanding timely action, entrepreneurs must evaluate risks, assess data, and anticipate consequences while resisting paralysis caused by uncertainty. Strong leaders understand that delayed decisions often carry greater costs than imperfect ones, because hesitation can erode competitive advantage. They cultivate the habit of analyzing scenarios objectively while separating emotion from evaluation. This balance ensures that confidence does not become recklessness and caution does not become stagnation. As experience accumulates, decision-making becomes sharper and more intuitive without sacrificing discipline. Teams observing consistent decisiveness develop trust and leadership stability, which reinforces alignment and reduces anxiety during transitions. When outcomes are unfavorable, responsible leaders treat results as feedback for refinement rather than triggers for blame. This approach fosters a culture of learning instead of fear. Over time, strategic confidence spreads across the organization. Employees feel secure within a structure guided by thoughtful authority. In this way, leadership under pressure becomes a cornerstone of sustainable expansion. Ultimately, leadership and influence in business determine whether an enterprise remains founder-dependent or evolves into a sustaining organization capable of growth beyond individual capacity. When leadership maturity deepens, entrepreneurs shift from task managers to architects of systems and developers of people. This shift transforms business from personal effort into collective momentum. The benefits are measurable in scalability, resilience, operational efficiency, and long-term brand strength. Organizations guided by strong leadership navigate economic fluctuations with greater stability. Teams remain aligned even when external conditions shift unpredictably. Cultural clarity preserves standards during rapid expansion. Stakeholder confidence increases when authority is steady and transparent. Over time, leadership capital becomes an asset as valuable as financial capital. It strengthens reputation, enhances negotiation power, and reinforces strategic partnerships. In this way, leadership does not merely support business growth but actively shapes its durability and influence in competitive markets. As leadership solidifies the internal structure of your enterprise, the next stage of growth demands outward focus toward adaptability and innovation, because even the strongest organization cannot thrive long-term if it becomes rigid in the face of evolving markets and emerging technologies. We now transition into a chapter that examines how sustained relevance, disciplined reinvention, and strategic foresight ensure that entrepreneurial success endures beyond temporary trends. Chapter 5: Innovation and Long-Term Business Growth. Innovation begins with awareness that markets are never static and that consumer expectations shift continuously in response to technological advancement, cultural evolution, and economic cycles, which means that entrepreneurs who fail to anticipate change eventually react too late to preserve competitive advantage. Long-term growth therefore depends on cultivating curiosity and vigilance, constantly observing patterns, listening to feedback, and analyzing signals that reveal emerging opportunities. When businesses commit to structured innovation processes, experimentation becomes intentional rather than accidental, allowing creative ideas to be tested, measured, and refined systematically. This disciplined approach prevents stagnation while preserving operational stability. Entrepreneurs who embed innovation into their culture encourage teams to question assumptions and propose improvements within strategic boundaries. As a result, adaptability becomes an organizational habit rather than an emergency response. Markets reward companies that evolve proactively instead of defensively. This proactive evolution strengthens brand relevance and customer loyalty. Clients remain engaged when products and services improve consistently. Competitors struggle to imitate organizations that innovate continuously. Over time, innovation becomes a defining identity marker. Businesses that internalize this principle position themselves for sustained leadership within their industries. Long-term business growth also depends on strategic reinvestment of profits into research, talent development, infrastructure, and technology that support scalability. Entrepreneurs who prioritize reinvestment over short-term consumption create foundations for compounding expansion. This disciplined allocation of resources strengthens resilience during economic downturns. It also enhances flexibility when new opportunities arise unexpectedly. Growth driven by reinvestment tends to be more stable and sustainable than growth fueled solely by aggressive expansion. As infrastructure strengthens, operational efficiency improves and costs are optimized. This optimization increases profit margins without compromising quality. Strong infrastructure also enables geographic expansion or product diversification. Entrepreneurs who plan reinvestment strategically avoid overextension while maintaining forward momentum. Long-term growth therefore reflects not only ambition but structured preparation. Through disciplined financial strategy, businesses convert temporary success into enduring strength. Adaptability remains central to long-term growth because rigid models struggle to survive disruptive change. Entrepreneurs who cultivate adaptive thinking analyze setbacks objectively and pivot strategies without abandoning core vision. This flexibility allows businesses to refine offerings, adjust pricing models, and reconfigure marketing approaches in response to shifting demand. Adaptation is not surrender but intelligent recalibration guided by data and insight. Organizations that resist change often protect outdated systems at the cost of relevance. In contrast, adaptive enterprises treat change as opportunity for refinement. This mindset reduces fear during uncertainty. Teams become comfortable navigating transition. Market volatility becomes manageable rather than destabilizing. Adaptability strengthens competitive positioning over time. Businesses that pivot effectively often emerge stronger after disruption. Through consistent recalibration, entrepreneurs preserve forward momentum. Energy management also plays a critical role in sustaining long-term business growth because innovation and expansion require mental clarity, physical stamina, and emotional resilience from leadership and teams alike. Entrepreneurs who neglect personal well-being often experience diminished judgment and decreased strategic creativity. Sustained high-performance demands balanced routines that support health and cognitive function. Organizational energy must also be managed through clear priorities and realistic timelines. Overextension weakens morale and reduces efficiency. Structured pacing preserves productivity across extended growth cycles. Leaders who model sustainable habits reinforce stability throughout the company. This stability supports consistent innovation and execution. Teams perform more effectively when burnout is minimized. Long-term growth therefore reflects disciplined energy stewardship. Through intentional balance, entrepreneurs maintain clarity necessary for strategic foresight. Ultimately, innovation and long-term business growth are inseparable from disciplined thinking, adaptive execution, and consistent reinvestment in people and systems that support scalability. Entrepreneurs who embrace these principles avoid complacency and remain responsive to evolving opportunities. Their organizations evolve with markets rather than resisting them. Competitive advantage becomes sustainable rather than temporary. Growth compounds steadily through reinvestment and innovation. Stakeholder confidence increases when adaptability is demonstrated consistently. Market relevance strengthens brand authority. Businesses become resilient across economic cycles. Strategic foresight replaces reactive decision-making. In this way, long-term growth becomes engineered rather than accidental. Entrepreneurs who internalize these principles build enterprises that not only survive change but shape it. As innovation and long-term growth strengthen the external structure of your business, a deeper realization begins to take shape, which is that enduring entrepreneurial success ultimately depends on strategic expansion, disciplined financial protection, and the ability to think beyond immediate gain toward legacy, a level impact that outlives market cycles and personal involvement. With this perspective in mind, we now transition into the final 3 chapters, where expansion, protection, and legacy converge into a complete entrepreneurial framework. Chapter 6. Strategic Expansion and Intelligent Scaling. Strategic expansion represents a defining moment in the entrepreneurial journey because it marks the transition from proving a concept to multiplying its impact. And this chapter explores how disciplined scaling, structural readiness, market timing, capital allocation, leadership development, and operational precision must align in order for growth to become sustainable rather than destabilizing. True expansion is not simply about increasing revenue or entering new markets, but about strengthening the underlying architecture of your business so that it can carry additional weight without fracturing under pressure. The benefits of intelligent scaling include increased market influence, stronger brand authority, diversified income streams, and the transformation of localized success into systemic dominance. However, the importance of approaching expansion strategically cannot be overstated, because premature growth often magnifies weaknesses that were manageable at smaller levels but become catastrophic when multiplied. In this chapter, you will understand how to evaluate readiness objectively, how to design infrastructure that supports scale, how to protect culture during growth, and how to maintain financial discipline while pursuing broader horizons. Expansion must be engineered rather than rushed. structured rather than improvised, because premature growth often magnifies weaknesses that were manageable at smaller levels but become catastrophic when multiplied. In this chapter, you will understand how to evaluate readiness objectively, how to design infrastructure that supports scale, how to protect culture during growth, and how to maintain financial discipline while pursuing broader horizons. Expansion must be engineered rather than rushed, structured rather than improvised, and measured rather than emotionally driven. When executed properly, scaling becomes the bridge between entrepreneurial effort and enterprise-level impact. When executed poorly, it becomes the source of collapse, disguised as ambition. Understanding this distinction separates visionary builders from reckless risk-takers. As we begin, consider expansion not as acceleration alone, but as amplification of everything that already exists within your business structure. The first principle of intelligent scaling is operational readiness, because growth multiplies existing systems and therefore requires those systems to be efficient, documented, and consistently repeatable before they are expanded. If your processes rely heavily on improvisation or founder intervention, scaling will expose fragility rather than generate strength. Documentation of workflows, performance metrics, accountability structures, and quality control mechanisms ensures that expansion does not dilute performance standards. Entrepreneurs often underestimate how quickly inefficiencies compound when volume increases, and what once seemed manageable becomes overwhelming when multiplied. Readiness also includes financial stability, ensuring that cash flow remains predictable enough to absorb the temporary volatility that often accompanies expansion efforts. Without stable liquidity, scaling initiatives can create strain that disrupts daily operations. Operational clarity reduces friction and preserves brand consistency across new markets or product lines. Structured systems allow delegation to occur confidently without compromising quality. This stability builds trust with customers and partners during transitional periods. As readiness strengthens, expansion becomes an extension of structure rather than a leap into chaos. Intelligent market timing represents the second pillar of strategic expansion, because entering new spaces too early or too late can significantly alter the probability of success, regardless of product quality or leadership strength. Expansion decisions must be supported by data analysis, customer demand indicators, competitive positioning assessments, and macroeconomic awareness rather than enthusiasm alone. When market signals demonstrate sustained demand and competitive gaps, expansion becomes an opportunity to capitalize on favorable momentum. However, when timing is misaligned, even well-funded initiatives can struggle to gain traction. Entrepreneurs who study trends carefully position themselves to move decisively at moments of optimal advantage. Timing also involves internal readiness of leadership and teams, ensuring that human capacity aligns with strategic ambition. Rapid expansion without leadership maturity can fracture culture and dilute standards. By contrast, synchronized timing amplifies momentum while preserving stability. Strategic patience often produces stronger results than impulsive speed. The discipline to wait for alignment demonstrates maturity in decision-making. As timing and readiness converge, scaling transforms from gamble to calculated progression. Capital allocation during expansion must be guided by disciplined forecasting and risk management rather than optimism, because growth initiatives require upfront investment that must be justified by realistic projections. Entrepreneurs must evaluate return on investment scenarios carefully, considering best-case expected and conservative outcomes before committing significant resources. Expansion funded entirely through debt increases vulnerability, while reinvestment of stable profits provides stronger foundation. Financial modeling reduces emotional bias in decision-making. Strategic reserves should remain intact to buffer unexpected volatility during growth phases. Without financial discipline, expansion can overextend liquidity and compromise stability. Intelligent scaling requires balancing ambition with prudence. Capital must be allocated toward infrastructure, talent acquisition, marketing, and operational systems in proportion to projected growth. This proportionality preserves sustainability. Entrepreneurs who treat capital strategically protect long-term positioning. Financial foresight ensures expansion enhances wealth rather than jeopardizes it. Leadership development becomes increasingly critical as scaling progresses, because expanded operations demand distributed authority rather than centralized control. Founders must transition from direct operators to strategic overseers who empower capable managers. This shift requires trust, training, and structured accountability systems. When leadership capacity grows internally, expansion becomes smoother and more coordinated. Delegation without preparation produces inconsistency, but structured empowerment produces scalability. Strong leadership alignment preserves culture during growth. Teams that understand vision and standards replicate quality consistently. As authority distributes responsibly, organizational resilience strengthens. Scaling therefore depends as much on people development as on financial planning. Entrepreneurs who invest in leadership pipelines secure long-term adaptability. Through deliberate empowerment, growth becomes sustainable across layers of management. Cultural preservation during expansion ensures that the original Teams that understand vision and standards replicate quality consistently. As authority distributes responsibly, organizational resilience strengthens. Scaling therefore depends as much on people development as on financial planning. Entrepreneurs who invest in leadership pipelines secure long-term adaptability. Through deliberate empowerment, growth becomes sustainable across layers of management. Cultural preservation during expansion ensures that the original values and performance standards, culture must be defined clearly before it can be protected. Without clarity, rapid hiring introduces conflicting norms that erode cohesion. Strong onboarding processes reinforce expectations and identity. Communication transparency maintains alignment during change. Leaders must model values consistently across growth stages. As culture strengthens, employee engagement remains stable. Stability reduces turnover during expansion stress. Customer experience remains consistent across locations or platforms. Brand identity becomes unified rather than fragmented. Cultural discipline safeguards reputation. In this way, expansion strengthens identity rather than diluting it. Technology integration supports intelligent scaling by automating processes, increasing efficiency, and improving data visibility across operations. Modern businesses rely on scalable digital systems to manage customer relationships, inventory, financial reporting, and analytics. Automation reduces manual error and frees human capacity for strategic initiatives. Data analytics enhance forecasting accuracy. With visibility into performance metrics, leaders adjust quickly. Technology investments must align with projected growth. Overinvestment wastes capital, while underinvestment restricts scalability. Strategic implementation ensures systems integrate seamlessly. Technology strengthens competitive positioning. Digital infrastructure supports geographic expansion. When integrated properly, technology becomes a multiplier of operational efficiency. Risk assessment remains ongoing throughout expansion, because new markets introduce regulatory, cultural, and competitive variables that must be understood thoroughly. Entrepreneurs must evaluate compliance requirements and local market behaviors. Legal structures may require adaptation. Strategic partnerships reduce unfamiliarity risks. Pilot programs test viability before full rollout. Incremental expansion reduces exposure. Contingency planning prepares for unexpected obstacles. Risk awareness enhances decision quality. Insurance and contractual clarity provide safeguards. Informed expansion minimizes vulnerability. Strategic flexibility allows recalibration. Through disciplined risk management, scaling remains controlled. Ultimately, strategic expansion and intelligent scaling represent the disciplined transformation of success into sustained influence, where growth is guided by readiness, timing, financial prudence, leadership strength, cultural preservation, technological integration, and calculated risk management rather than unchecked ambition. Entrepreneurs who internalize these principles expand with confidence, rooted in preparation rather than emotion. Their businesses grow structurally rather than superficially. Stability increases alongside revenue. Reputation strengthens rather than weakens. Teams remain aligned during change. Capital remains protected. Competitive advantage compounds steadily. Scaling becomes a phase of reinforcement rather than strain. Through structured expansion, entrepreneurs elevate enterprises into enduring institutions capable of navigating complexity with strength and strategic clarity. Chapter 7: Financial Protection, Risk Management, and Wealth Preservation. As businesses grow and revenue expands, the focus of the entrepreneur must gradually shift from pure accumulation toward structured protection, because wealth that is not intentionally safeguarded can be eroded by market volatility, legal exposure, economic downturns, or internal mismanagement. This chapter explores how financial protection, risk management, asset security, diversification, and disciplined preservation strategies ensure that entrepreneurial success becomes stable rather than fragile. Growth alone does not guarantee security, and many enterprises that scale rapidly eventually collapse due to unprotected vulnerabilities that were ignored during expansion. The benefit of mastering financial protection lies in stability, confidence, and long-term continuity that allows strategic decisions to be made from strength rather than fear. Preserving wealth is not a defensive mindset but an advanced stage of maturity in business thinking, where foresight replaces reaction and structure replaces assumption. Entrepreneurs who fail to protect their gains often find themselves rebuilding from preventable losses. By contrast, those who integrate risk awareness into daily operations create resilience that supports both growth and sustainability. This chapter will guide you through preserving wealth is not a defensive mindset but an advanced stage of maturity in business thinking, where foresight replaces reaction and structure replaces assumption. Entrepreneurs who fail to protect their gains often find themselves rebuilding from preventable losses. By contrast, those who integrate risk awareness into daily operations create resilience that supports both growth and sustainability. This chapter will guide you through diversification strategies, legal structures, liquidity management, and proactive safeguards that reinforce your financial foundation. Protection is not hesitation, and preservation is not stagnation, but rather disciplined reinforcement of what has already been built. Understanding this distinction elevates entrepreneurship from temporary success to enduring prosperity. The first pillar of financial protection is diversification. Because reliance on a single income stream or market segment exposes your enterprise to unnecessary concentration risk. Diversification can occur through product expansion, geographic distribution, investment portfolios, or strategic partnerships that broaden revenue channels. When one sector experiences decline, diversified structures provide stability through alternative sources of income. This strategic spread reduces volatility and protects core operations. However, diversification must remain aligned with expertise and strategic capacity, because reckless expansion into unfamiliar industries can create complexity without stability. Intelligent diversification is measured, research-driven, and aligned with long-term objectives. It balances opportunity with operational feasibility. Entrepreneurs who diversify strategically enhance resilience without diluting focus. Over time, diversified assets create financial buffers that absorb market shocks. This stability strengthens decision-making confidence. As diversification deepens, dependence decreases and autonomy increases. Legal structure and compliance represent another critical layer of protection, because improper entity formation or contractual oversight can expose entrepreneurs to liabilities that threaten both business and personal assets. Establishing appropriate corporate structures separates operational risk from individual wealth. Clear contracts reduce ambiguity and prevent disputes that consume time and resources. Compliance with regulations ensures continuity and avoids penalties that erode profitability. Entrepreneurs who treat legal frameworks as foundational rather than optional build stronger enterprises. Regular legal reviews adapt structures to growth stages. Intellectual property protection safeguards brand identity and proprietary systems. These measures preserve competitive advantage. Legal clarity strengthens negotiation power with partners and investors. Protection becomes integrated rather than reactive. Structured compliance fosters long-term credibility. Liquidity management also plays a vital role in wealth preservation, because profitable businesses can still fail if cash flow becomes constrained during temporary downturns. Maintaining strategic reserves allows operations to continue without panic-driven borrowing. Liquidity provides flexibility to seize unexpected opportunities without destabilizing core systems. Entrepreneurs who manage cash flow proactively reduce vulnerability during market contractions. Predictable forecasting enhances preparation. Controlled expenses maintain stability during fluctuations. Strategic reserves create psychological confidence in leadership. This confidence supports calm decision-making under pressure. Liquidity planning strengthens resilience. It reduces dependence on external financing. Through disciplined liquidity management, preservation becomes proactive rather than reactive. Risk management extends beyond finances into operational vulnerabilities, cybersecurity, insurance coverage, and contingency planning that anticipates potential disruptions before they escalate. Insurance policies tailored to industry exposure provide additional safety layers. Cybersecurity safeguards protect digital assets in increasingly technology-driven markets. Contingency plans prepare teams for unexpected interruptions. Entrepreneurs who assess risk regularly strengthen organizational awareness. Risk identification allows preventative action rather than crisis response. Scenario planning improves adaptability. Structured risk frameworks reduce uncertainty. Prevention costs less than recovery. Risk discipline enhances strategic clarity. Protection becomes embedded within daily operations. Wealth preservation also requires disciplined tax planning, because inefficient tax strategies can erode profitability quietly over time. Entrepreneurs must understand how tax structures influence reinvestment and asset growth. Strategic planning reduces unnecessary liability while maintaining compliance. Professional advisory support strengthens financial architecture. Tax efficiency increases retained earnings. Retained earnings support reinvestment and asset diversification. Long-term planning prevents surprises during audits or regulatory changes. Financial transparency builds credibility with institutions. Structured tax strategies reinforce sustainability. Preservation becomes aligned with expansion. Informed planning transforms obligation into optimization. Capital allocation during preservation phases shifts from aggressive expansion toward balanced reinvestment and defensive positioning. Entrepreneurs must decide how much profit is reinvested into growth versus secured for protection. This balance evolves with maturity of the business. Over-aggressive reinvestment increases exposure. Over-conservative preservation limits innovation. Strategic equilibrium supports stability and growth simultaneously. Allocation decisions reflect long-term vision. Diversified investment portfolios strengthen wealth continuity. Defensive assets offset operational risk. Entrepreneurs who master allocation reduce volatility. Wealth becomes structured rather than fluctuating. Discipline reinforces endurance. Psychological maturity plays a subtle yet powerful role in financial protection, because preservation demands patience and restraint that may conflict with entrepreneurial drive for rapid expansion. Leaders must resist ego-driven risk-taking once stability has been achieved. Strategic humility strengthens sustainability. Preservation requires long-term perspective beyond quarterly performance. Entrepreneurs who think generationally make calmer decisions. Emotional discipline reduces impulsive exposure. Confidence grounded in preparation replaces reactive urgency. Mature thinking prioritizes endurance. Stability becomes a strategic objective. Wealth preservation reflects evolved leadership. Through disciplined mindset, financial protection becomes integrated. Ultimately, financial protection, risk management, and wealth preservation transform entrepreneurial success from temporary profitability into stable prosperity capable of enduring economic cycles and competitive shifts. Entrepreneurs who integrate diversification, legal safeguards, liquidity planning, tax strategy, and disciplined capital allocation build enterprises that withstand volatility without losing forward momentum. Protection does not limit growth but stabilizes it. Stability enhances confidence. Confidence improves strategic clarity. Resilience strengthens reputation. Long-term positioning improves steadily. Preservation ensures continuity. Through structured safeguards, wealth becomes secure rather than exposed. In this way, entrepreneurship evolves from ambition-driven expansion into strategically protected prosperity prepared for sustained influence and generational impact. Chapter 8: Legacy, Impact, and Generational Wealth Thinking. As entrepreneurship matures beyond the stages of creation, scaling, and protection, a deeper question begins to emerge, which is not how much can be earned, but what will endure when direct involvement eventually diminishes. And this chapter explores how legacy thinking, structured succession, generational wealth strategy, impact-driven leadership, and long-term vision transform business success into lasting influence. True legacy is not built accidentally, nor is it defined solely by financial accumulation, but by the systems, values, institutions, and opportunities that continue to operate and create value long after the founder steps aside. The benefit of generational thinking is perspective, because when decisions are evaluated across decades rather than quarters, strategic patience replaces impulsive urgency and wisdom tempers ambition. Entrepreneurs who embrace legacy thinking shift from short-term wins to long-term stewardship, understanding that sustainable impact requires durability in structure and clarity in purpose. This stage of business development demands emotional maturity, disciplined planning, and alignment between financial objectives and core values. Without structured succession and continuity planning, even successful enterprises can decline rapidly when leadership transitions unexpectedly. By contrast, those who plan intentionally for generational continuity create stability that reassures employees, partners, and family stakeholders alike. Legacy thinking strengthens decision-making because it forces leaders to consider consequences beyond immediate profit. It encourages ethical standards, reputation management, and cultural integrity that support long-term trust. In this chapter, we examine how entrepreneurs move from building businesses to building institutions. The shift from ownership to stewardship marks the highest level of entrepreneurial evolution. The first pillar of legacy creation is clarity of purpose, because enduring enterprises are rooted in principles that extend beyond financial gain and guide behavior consistently across generations. When mission and values are clearly defined, they act as anchors during periods of transition, preventing strategic drift and cultural erosion. Purpose-driven organizations attract committed leaders who align with vision rather than merely compensation. This alignment strengthens continuity when leadership changes occur. Entrepreneurs must document guiding philosophies and decision-making frameworks so that successors understand not only what to do, but why it matters. Purpose clarity also enhances brand longevity. As customers connect with values that remain consistent over time without defined purpose, growth may occur but durability weakens. Clear principles reduce internal conflict during succession. They preserve organizational identity. Over time, purpose becomes the foundation upon which generational leadership stands. Through intentional articulation of mission, legacy gains direction and stability. Succession planning represents the structural dimension of generational thinking, requiring identification, preparation, and mentorship of future leaders capable of maintaining and expanding the enterprise responsibly. Entrepreneurs must evaluate potential successors based on competence, alignment with values, and strategic capability rather than familial proximity or convenience alone. Leadership development programs strengthen internal pipelines. Mentorship ensures knowledge transfer beyond written documentation. Structured governance systems provide oversight during transition. Clear ownership agreements prevent disputes that destabilize organizations. Succession plans must be revisited periodically to remain relevant. Transparency in planning reduces uncertainty among stakeholders. Preparation prevents crisis-driven transitions. Strategic continuity strengthens market confidence. Through disciplined succession design, leadership change becomes orderly rather than disruptive. Generational wealth thinking also requires sophisticated financial planning that ensures assets are preserved, transferred, and structured in ways that minimize erosion while maximizing continuity. Estate planning, trust structures, and diversified investments protect accumulated capital. Financial literacy education for heirs strengthens responsible stewardship. Without preparation, wealth can dissipate through mismanagement. Entrepreneurs who prioritize education alongside inheritance increase probability of sustainability. Long-term asset allocation reduces exposure to concentrated risk. Structured giving strategies align philanthropy with values. Professional advisory support enhances strategic positioning. Generational planning reduces tax inefficiencies. Clear financial frameworks prevent confusion. Through structured planning, wealth becomes durable rather than temporary. Impact-driven leadership expands legacy beyond financial inheritance by focusing on the broader contribution an enterprise makes to communities, industries, and society. Businesses that create opportunity, foster innovation, and uphold ethical standards leave lasting influence. Impact strengthens brand loyalty and stakeholder trust. Entrepreneurs who invest in mentorship and community development extend their influence beyond transactions. Philanthropic initiatives amplify social contribution. Sustainable business practices enhance long-term credibility. Ethical leadership reinforces institutional respect. Employees feel pride in contributing to meaningful missions. Reputation becomes an enduring asset. Impact-driven enterprises shape industry standards. Through purposeful engagement, legacy transcends profit. Long-term reputation management becomes essential in legacy-focused entrepreneurship. Because public perception influences partnerships, succession transitions, and generational influence. Consistency in ethics strengthens trust across decades. Transparent communication preserves credibility. Crisis management plans protect institutional image. Leaders must act with integrity even when pressures intensify. Reputation compounds similarly to capital. Positive legacy attracts high-quality successors and partners. Market trust enhances stability. Ethical consistency reduces long-term risk. Reputation strengthens negotiation power. Public trust enhances generational continuity. Through disciplined integrity, legacy gains durability. Ultimately, legacy, impact, and generational wealth thinking elevate entrepreneurship from individual ambition into enduring contribution, where structured planning, ethical leadership, financial foresight, and purposeful influence converge to create institutions capable of thriving across generations. Entrepreneurs who embrace this final stage view themselves not merely as owners but as stewards entrusted with preserving and expanding value responsibly. Their decisions reflect patience and foresight. Wealth becomes structured and protected. Leadership transitions become orderly. Cultural identity remains intact. Impact extends beyond immediate stakeholders. Reputation strengthens steadily. Institutions gain stability. Future leaders inherit clarity and capability. In this way, entrepreneurship achieves its highest expression, transforming temporary success into lasting legacy that shapes opportunity, stability, and influence for generations to come. Conclusion: the entrepreneurial mindset as a lifelong discipline. As we reach the conclusion of entrepreneurs, business mindset, and wealth thinking, it becomes clear that entrepreneurship is not a single achievement, a financial milestone, or a moment of recognition, but a disciplined way of thinking that evolves continuously through vision, execution, leadership, protection, and legacy. Throughout these chapters, you have explored how identity shapes opportunity, how systems transform ideas into scalable enterprises, how wealth must be structured and protected, and how leadership and innovation determine long-term relevance in competitive markets. You have seen that expansion requires preparation, that protection requires foresight, and that legacy requires maturity beyond personal ambition. Entrepreneurship is not built on motivation alone, but on disciplined thinking, calculated risk, strategic patience, and relentless self-development. It demands resilience during uncertainty, clarity during complexity, and integrity during success. The most successful entrepreneurs are not those who chase trends impulsively, but those who think structurally, act decisively, and refine continuously. Wealth thinking is not greed-driven accumulation, but intentional value creation paired with long-term stewardship. True business mastery lies in balancing ambition with discipline, growth with protection, and influence with responsibility. As you reflect on this journey, understand that knowledge alone does not transform outcomes unless it is implemented consistently and refined through action. The principles you have learned are tools, and tools become powerful only when used deliberately. Your mindset will determine how far you scale, how well you protect, and how deeply you impact. Entrepreneurship is ultimately a test of perspective. Because markets will fluctuate, competitors will emerge, technologies will evolve, and economic cycles will challenge stability. Yet the disciplined entrepreneur remains anchored in strategic clarity and adaptive thinking. When you operate from ownership rather than blame, from vision rather than fear, and from structure rather than improvisation. You create momentum that compounds over time. Every decision you make from this point forward will either reinforce or weaken the mindset you have cultivated. The discipline to evaluate risk intelligently, reinvest strategically, empower leadership, and think generationally will distinguish you from those who build temporarily and those who build enduringly. Success will require continued learning, consistent execution, and emotional maturity that prevents ego from overriding judgment. The journey does not end with this audiobook because business mastery is an ongoing process of refinement and recalibration. What changes now is your awareness, your perspective, and your capacity to act with intention rather than reaction. When mindset evolves, results follow. When structure strengthens, opportunity expands. When discipline deepens, wealth stabilizes. And when purpose aligns with strategy, legacy becomes possible. If this audiobook has expanded your thinking, sharpened your strategy, or challenged you to elevate your entrepreneurial standards, take the next step intentionally rather than passively allowing inspiration to fade into routine. Apply at least one principle immediately, whether it is refining your systems, strengthening your leadership structure, diversifying your assets, or clarifying your long-term vision, because transformation begins with decisive action. Follow Freema audiobooks for more in-depth explorations designed to elevate mindset and performance. Subscribe so you never miss future insights that can strengthen your business foundation and financial intelligence. Leave a review to support the mission of bringing powerful, structured knowledge to ambitious thinkers around the world. Share this audiobook with fellow entrepreneurs who are ready to move beyond surface motivation and interdisciplined wealth-building strategy. The marketplace rewards those who act, not those who merely consume information. Your next level of growth will not come from waiting for perfect conditions, but from implementing what you already understand with courage and precision. Build wisely, lead responsibly, protect strategically, and think generationally. Your enterprise has the potential to become more than a source of income. It can become a platform for impact and enduring influence. The mindset is now yours. The execution begins today.